Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Jake Bell. I'm a manager here at the AI Center for Government at the Partnership for Public Service. If you aren't familiar with our work, the Partnership for Public Service is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization focused on building a better government and a stronger democracy. For over 20 years, we've done that by helping our government recruit, empower, and retain our nation's best talent, equipping public sector leaders to serve the public good through our Public Service Leadership Institute, and working to ensure that the public trusts and engages with a well-functioning government. One of the initiatives we have at the partnership is, of course, our AI Center for Government, and this event is part of that work. So the AI Center for Government is committed to fostering AI leadership, talent, and literacy across federal, state, and local governments. We aim to ensure that public sector leaders are effective users and smart regulators of the technology. We do this by developing AI leaders, strengthening AI talent capacity, empowering AI community learning and literacy, and celebrating agencies at all levels of government that are using AI effectively. And I should, of course, mention that the work of the AI Center for Government is made possible by its generous founding supporters, Google.org and Microsoft. So, as you've seen, the topic that we have for today is navigating privacy and information security. Privacy and security are two concepts that are closely related and often conflated, but they're distinct, I think, in important ways. So at a basic level, I think of security as protecting systems, data, and infrastructure from unauthorized access, breaches, or attacks. While on the other hand, privacy is focused more on how data is collected, used, shared, retained, and governed. To kind of further illustrate that distinction, I would keep in mind that a system can be secure but privacy violating, and at the same time, a system can have privacy protections but still be vulnerable. So while this topic is always timely, I think it's particularly urgent when you consider just a couple of the headlines that we've seen over the past month. So in May, Google's threat intelligence group reported that for the first time, they identified an attacker using a zero-day exploit that they believed was developed with AI. And of course, we've all seen the wonder and panic that's been caused by the reported capabilities of Anthropic's Mythos 5 and Fable 5 models, which recently led to an export control directive from the US government to suspend all access by any foreign national. So we won't be debating the capabilities of Mythos today or whether the US government's response is the right approach, but it's clear that the very capabilities that let AI find and patch vulnerabilities at unprecedented speed are the same capabilities that can be turned against us. That's exactly the tension that our panelists live with and think about every day, and it's why getting privacy and information security right in this moment matters so much. So with that, I would love to introduce the folks we have to help guide us through this conversation today. So first we have Bishop Garrison, who's a founder and principal at Orange Court Strategies. And we have Marina Kelly, who's the Chief Information Security Officer for the city of Raleigh in North Carolina. The format for today's session is that each panelist will take about 10 minutes to walk us through a specific use case that they've worked on in their as part of their work in the public sector. Then I will ask, after they've each had a chance to present their use case, I will then ask some questions. We'll have a little panel discussion and then open it up to a Q&A with questions that we can take from all of you. So with that in mind, we have both the chat and the Q&A function available here in Zoom. If you have questions that you would like the panelists to answer, please put that in the Q&A feature. If you want to just generally chat, please feel free to use the chat function to introduce yourself, make a comment, things like that. So with that in mind, I will go ahead and give a deeper introduction of Bishop before he does his use case. So Bishop Garrison is a senior national security executive, veteran, and writer who has served in military, presidential administrations and campaigns, the nonprofit community, the private sector, and academia through his 20-plus-year career. He's a graduate of USMA at West Point and William and Mary Law School, previously served in both the Obama and Biden administrations, as well as a senior executive in the private and public sectors focused on technology and national security operations. He's a senior fellow and adjunct professor with the National Security Institute at George Mason Law School and a future security fellow with New America. He's written and taught extensively on the responsible and ethical use of emerging technology and artificial intelligence, personnel security reform, and organizational leadership, among other national security topics critical to the nation. So with that, thank you so much for joining us, Bishop, and I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, and thank you, Jake, so much for the introduction. And thank all of you for joining us today. As I was mentioning to our colleagues right before we started, it's the first day of summer here in the Garrison household. And I'm sure that's the case for many of you. So, welcome to summer, and I hope it's going well for you. So, the way I'm going to actually engage you folks on this topic is a little bit from all the different sides. As Jake mentioned, I've had experience in this in academia, excuse me, and the public and private sectors. To include my work at trade association, my work now with my own firm, as well as some of my work in the private sector previously in the government. So one of the things that we're actually hitting on, because this is a particularly a national security topic, I'm going to speak in some generality in some parts because this is an ongoing effort. And I want to make sure I'm not running afoul of anything. So, of course, you won't hear anything that's even abuts to classified information or anything that's potentially sensitive. But I wanted to make sure I said that at the outset, so you understand how I'm approaching this. Over time, I worked with a variety of folks, and one of the key issues that kept coming up was deepfake detection. So this type of malicious content that was being made, replicated by AI tools, what could we do in order to try to detect it for various reasons? So some of this comes from how some of these types of deepfake detectors or some types of deepfake technologies are being used in everything from identification of targets to human trafficking issues to a variety of different ways, potentially from visual and audio, that we could utilize it to fight against this type of malicious content. So first was really trying to get a better sense of the question at hand, like what problem were we setting out to solve. And as a part of that, we said, hey, we want this type of detector to be able to at least mark or flag suspicious video for teams as we're moving forward to understand if we needed to look more deeply into where the source material comes from, if it was understanding if it was some type of attempt to get into a system. As you see, a lot of these more and more phishing efforts are popping up, and more of this type of malicious content is being pushed out because now we do have these type of sophisticated generative AI tools that can really produce some amazing video and audio fakes, and we wanted to see what we could do to properly protect against them. On the flip side of this, it's an interesting fact because, as many of you know that are more technically inclined perhaps than I am, in order to create a proper deep fake detector, what you're also doing is looking for opportunities to generate synthetic content yourself, understanding how any type of nefarious actor may be generating that content to then utilize against you. So it also means that you're finding new ways of replicating better synthetic content yourself that in part in the longer run may be utilized to help you train algorithms as a part of a data set. Right now we continuously see that algorithms trained on real data versus any type of synthetic data tend to be stronger, tend to be just have better benchmarks overall. But there's a time in which that gap is continuing to close, and there's a time in which that may shift, and then you take away some of the privacy concerns when you're talking about finding the right green data sets versus any type of potentially scrape material off the internet or anything else. So there are a few different factors here. So going into the question itself, though, we said, hey, well, do we want something that is looking at live video? Do you want something that has the ability to look at pre-recorded material? Well, we want all of it. We want both because it's the government, it's the way it usually goes. So we knew we needed to pin that down early as you're continuing to talk about, again, anything that also may be looking at any potential classified material versus looking at anything that's open source. We needed to have an understanding of what frameworks we were working under. In particular, and being able to do a proper risk assessment of this type of material as we were moving forward. So there are several questions as we continue to build on this that we had to ask ourselves again because the government is going to think differently. I don't want to say be any more thoughtful than private sector because it's not fair, but they will definitely think differently in how they're engaging on some of these questions. So, for instance, when we looked at what building out a pilot with a particular vendor that was already in this space, we said, hey, well, is this actually going to be the right mission fit? Is this tool going to solve the problem as we're defining it? Or are we going to need something that's off the shelf, or are we going to need to have engineers working with the vendor side by side in order to augment whatever they already have? Like, how are we going about doing this? And what is the realistic accuracy that we're going to be able to get from this? We wanted to begin with the ability to make sure that we had that we could identify people and that we could do it from certain ranges. But then we said, well, this is a computer vision tool at the end of the day. So how are we looking at identifying license plates? How are we looking at identifying connexes that are coming in from ships? That if we want to be able to target a particular one because we're worried about what's inside of it, we'll be able to do that. Then it becomes, well, how is this also going to be deployed? Like, we're talking about the algorithm itself, and they did have a particular type of hardware that could potentially work, but would it only be in that type of hardware? And if that's the case, what are the practical uses of that technology out in the field? And that was another thing that we had to take into consideration. Are you only talking about a handheld camera? Are you talking about smart cameras? And which ways were we going to potentially deploy this? Additionally, worried about false positives. We know, and when you're looking at the NIST benchmarks and evaluations from a lot of vendors, that when you move from a test environment and you're going into a live working real world environment, you often see some lags in performance. You could have degradation all the way up to, like, I think 50 or 60%. So that's not a small percentage of drop off. So we needed to better understand, well, what were the right conditions for the use of technology? How could we fight against or do our best to mitigate that type of degradation? And what was just the optimal operation scene? And how was the government potentially going to already thinking about using this this type of technology in its own operations out in the field? So going forward, again, we also had to look at, like, just if you're talking about video that's manipulated, will that be including video with audio? Would this, even though this was being designed for video, how would it look against any type of still images? Would those images need to be of people? Could you also look at text? Could you look, again, I mentioned looking at license plates, vehicles, other things. This was another consideration as we're looking through a holistic use case of this type of technology. Because, again, even though we're building this out for this particular use case at this time, the government understands it's going to have, the department, the agency we're working with, understood that it was going to have just kind of a myriad of needs moving forward. And understanding that operations shift and real world scenarios shift, you needed a type of technology in this regard that also had the ability to be updated, had the ability to meet some of the challenges that we see with AI technology, because it's almost continuing to develop at an exponential rate. So we were doing all we could on the front end to ensure the most flexibility and in a variety of additional potential use cases in the future, while being hyper focused on what we needed this technology to do in terms of being able to identify whether or not a particular video was real or was fake, and if it was fake, how it might have been manipulated. And then finally, going back to some of the overall standards too, and this is something I hit on a little bit earlier, and Jake hit on as well. When you talk about the privacy perspective, well, what were we actually going to be using for our initial data sets in order to properly train this type of model? Green data sets meaning that you had full waivers, privacy waivers, and privileges to use that type of data in the system from the individuals whose likeness were being used. That was incredibly important, and it also was very difficult. Where you can go out to a broker and pay premium for these cleared type of data sets. Of course, lots of companies will at times go out and find less expensive ways, we'll call it, of gathering this type of data for these types of models. So we wanted to ensure that anything that we were using were going to meet the best possible standards overall. And that any information coming in was cleared information from individuals who were fully aware that their likeness was being utilized for this type of project. And then finally, when you talk about this type of facial recognition technology, you also have to really take into account that ethnicity, skin tones really do come into play. And you have some models that model very well with darker skin tones and some that don't really do well at all. So we needed something that was going to be the best of breed in that regard, that could kind of look across the whole spectrum and be able to be able to identify individuals regardless of these types of characteristics as to the best possible benchmark thing. So overall, that's a lot that I've thrown in on this, but that was kind of the mindset as we were looking through this type of use case. Some of the major factors that we were looking at and working with in a public-private partnership in order to really develop something that, even though we know a lot of folks have been working on deepfake technology, but really looking at the next steps of it, how to operationalize it, how you would really properly field it, how will you develop it, and then on the back end being very considerate on how it would ultimately be used, because this is also a type of technology that can be abused if you let the wrong people without the proper oversight utilize it however they might. So that's really my overview for this, and I look forward to your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bishop, for walking us through that. And I think you really highlighted so well this kind of duality that we're talking about, right? About how the same technology that could be used to protect us can also be used for harm in some cases. Even just thinking about, right, the concept of deepfakes, right? Like using these tools to create very entertaining things or potentially, legitimately educational products. The same technology can also be used to spread disinformation, commit fraud, et cetera. And
Yeah, and
so,
none of it is. I think we also fall into the trap when it comes to some of these types of deepfake technologies, thinking that it's all overtly just going to be used for some type of nefarious purpose. Like they're all inherently bad types of tool, and it's just not. It's about the way the tool is leveraged. At the end of the day, it's a tool. Hammer could be a weapon. A hammer could hammer nails. Like it really comes back to the overall problem statement and what you're trying to achieve with them.
perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
we will now turn to our other panelist, Marina Kelly, and I'll do a deeper introduction of her really quick before I turn it over to her. So Marina is the Chief Information Security Officer for the city of Raleigh, North Carolina, where she leads cybersecurity strategy focused on resilience, risk management, and the secure enablement of innovation. Her career spans local government, education, and cybersecurity, with leadership in governance, third-party risk, and emerging technology adoption, including AI and quantum readiness. Known for people-centered leadership, she builds strong teams and practical security programs that support mission delivery and public trust. And we're really excited to hear your specific use case and really appreciate you sharing the time with us today. Over to you, Marina.
Thank you, Jake. And thank you, Bishop. That was really interesting and fascinating. And deepfakes are something we are already talking about in the city of Raleigh. We're already starting to see some use of that by attackers. So what I'd like to do today is share with the group a particular project that we have been working on for the last few months here in the city of Raleigh, set the context for what happened and why we landed here, and share some information about how we started to address this concern. And so So I want to talk to you today about James, the joint analytical model for enterprise security that we've developed at the city of Raleigh. And James is named for his creator, James, who is one of our security architects here in the city. And our goal was to deliver actionable threat intelligence. We want to make sure that this program had a focus on security and privacy. And because we do have a number of critical infrastructures here in the city of Raleigh that we have to protect as part of our mandate. So I do also want to just mention here that this has been cleared for public discussion, and it's, again, part of our values is that we are doing this in a transparent, accountable way with the use of AI. So let me set the story here. So back in February of 2025, we got the announcement from MSISAC that there were going to be changes to their program. And the city of Raleigh was a big consumer of MSISAC threat intelligence. And so it put us in a bit of a quandary. We knew the program was going to change. We didn't really know what was getting ready to happen. And so we started to talk about what were we going to do in this situation if we no longer had access to this threat intelligence. The other thing we had started to notice was that those feeds were becoming more and more delayed. And so we would hear about a breach or a vulnerability in the news, and then we would get the bulletin 2 or 3 days later, and we needed more lead time to be able to respond appropriately. And so Raleigh is one of the fastest growing areas of the country. Just in the 2 years I've been with the city, we've gone from the 41st to the 39th largest city in the US. And so what we've seen with that is that we are increasingly being attacked by a variety of attack types, including nation state actors. And so what we saw was that threat continued to grow. We're a small information security team. So we need to figure out what we were going to do, because what we were doing manually wasn't working. So the MSISAC really started, as we're having these discussions, to bring to the surface the concerns we had in general around threat intelligence and how we handled this. And so, again, we knew we had to do something, and this landed in the context of a city that was also beginning to become truly innovative with the use of AI. So we are, in the municipal space, a known organization for having already stepped into agentic AI. We already have a number of agents in production that help with supporting our employee and resident services here in the city. And so we felt like these two things were crossing for a reason. And so we looked to how could we use AI to help us solve this problem. And one of the things that we did and we wanted to do for the city was, as we were determining that we needed to use multiple LLMs to be able to address the incredible scope of use cases that we were seeing in the city for AI, for productivity, and enhanced services, was we wanted to be able to help to bring these into the city in a way that had a security and privacy focus. And so the Information Security Group in the city of Raleigh was the first sanctioned group in the city to have Claude AI. And so we wanted to use this foundation to help solve the problem. So when we started this program and designing it, we had these 5 non-negotiable principles or requirements that it had to meet. Obviously, first and foremost is always our mandate, which is to protect privacy and sensitive data of our residents, as well as our employees, our vendors, and our partners. We wanted to make sure that what we built aligned with the values of the city of Raleigh. So we wanted to make sure that we were strengthening that public trust, that we were being good stewards of data and processes, that we were being transparent and honest about the work we were doing in this space, because we already knew from our citizens, or from our residents, that there were already concerns about the use of AI in public government spaces. And we knew the way to continue to build that trust with our residents and our partners was to be open and honest about what we were doing. So that needed to be auditable. We need to be able to explain what we were doing, and there need to be transparency in what we were doing. One of the things that had arisen as we were having these discussions about what it is, as we were kind of greenfielding what it is we wanted, was that many times we were just being consumers of threat feeds. So we get these from a number of places, but it was data. What we were not getting were IOCs or queries we could run, things that made this actionable that we could move more rapidly in order to address what we were seeing. And so we wanted to make sure we built that into this program as well. And then we also were a municipal government. We have the same budget struggles as everyone else. We're a small team. And so what we wanted to be able to do was really shift workload. This we knew from from what we had surfaced, what we had documented with our processes around the gathering of threat intelligence and the sharing of briefings, was it could be automated, and it could be automated well. And that would allow us to free time for our team to be able to really focus on those parts that AI does not do well. That, using your judgment and your wisdom and your experience in the cybersecurity space to determine what to do next to make those strategic decisions. So we built these guardrails, these requirements first to make sure that as we advanced and built out this agent, that we would be able to say that we did this the way it should be done. Excuse me. So our CIO, Mark Wittenberg, always talks about when we're talking about the AI space here in the city of Raleigh, we take a crawl, walk, run approach. I always say what we take is a crawl, walk, stub your toe a few times, and then run approach. And so we stubbed our toes as we started. So we always recommend, and this is pretty much best practices when you're moving into these types of spaces, is you start small. Start small, start something that, eat the elephant one bite at a time, don't boil the ocean, whatever those cliches you want to use here, is we wanted to start small, and we built several of these small automation components using Claude Code. And again, we wanted to take this opportunity to really get embedded with Claude and understand it, because we also needed to understand how it works so we could start to build the guardrails and harnesses around the model before it went to an enterprise level. So what we found was, yes, starting small made sense, but because we started small, we built these individual skills. There were 10 different skills. That does not scale. So when we found issues with one skill, there was no way for us to, if we fixed it, to propagate that out across the other 10 skills easily. We'd have to go in and touch every skill that needed to be updated. So that didn't feel like it was really saving us much time or increasing our productivity. We also found that those skills often had duplicate logic in them, and that the skills themselves sometimes weren't consistent in what they were outputting into the next step of the process. And then we had an issue with integration. We were able to put out more information, put it into a bulletin. So it saved a lot of time. I would spend 3 to 4 hours every Monday morning just reading through and combing through information and data to try and build out what was happening, my own threat intelligence briefing, to determine how we were going to strategize and what we were going to do and how we were going to respond. But this really did help bring that down. I didn't have to do that. It would land in my mailbox, but the problem was with our analyst got it, but he was still having to do manual work around it. There were still some things missing here. And so we found that the productivity issue was still persistent for us. So what did we learn here? We learned that the architecture of the design matters. And so we did that root cause analysis. We determined that we needed to take a step back and look at the architecting of the solution. We knew now that we could do it. We knew that we could build these processes. They could be automated, but now we needed to architect it better to be more unified and not as ad hoc as we had started out with. So that brings us to James, our intelligence engine, so our cyber threat intelligence agent. He is our unified system for these Claude components that we built, those 10 AI skills. It's actually more than 10 now, over 22,000 lines of codes produced for this. And it brought in some additional capabilities that we needed, such as relevant scoring of the vulnerability or the threat, building out the hunt queries for the analyst or the engineer, so they just had to pick them up and plug them into the tool as opposed to trying to write a regex or whatever they needed to do. Also being able to give mitigation strategies, because in some cases, these were 0 day and there were no patches yet. So what did we need to do in our ecosystem to help mitigate what we could until that patch was available. And we were able to meet the goal, which was to be able to get this intelligence in the hands of our people in the team, as well as our stakeholders across the city, in hours, not days. And so we were able to ingest those multiple feeds from multiple sources, let Claude analyze and score that for us to generate those hunt queries and those mitigation strategies, and then to drop that into our inboxes and have it ready to go. So it's in production now. We love James, and we also love James who created him, but we really love James the agent because we continue to evolve James and continue to improve his processes. But it has had a really big impact immediately in the city of Raleigh. And again, this started in March. We're now in June, and so we're already seeing some really important impacts around in protecting the city in a better stance of making sure that we're protecting those critical city services like public safety, like our water department, our large gathering spaces like our convention center and our concert venues. We have been able to reduce our dependence on federal and state information, and we'll be able to use theirs and be able to process it and integrate it into our vendor feeds, the news, what we're seeing out in the media. And really the biggest impact has been for our analysts. We have a single analyst for the whole city, and he has now been able to really focus in on what he's great at, which is figuring out what to do, getting that information disseminated to stakeholders, because we do have a centralized IT team in the city of Raleigh, but we also have departmental ITs in a few of our other spaces. And so being able to share that information quickly, but really freeing up his time, which has been a critical aspect of this, and being able to get to a decision and a movement as quickly as possible. As we know, in an age of AI, as we move towards AI, fighting AI, we have to be able to respond as fast as possible to what we're finding. And this has allowed us in the city of Raleigh to become a model for how you can use these tools in an information security setting. Oftentimes, we have our partners in the city and state levels that have just taken this attitude of we're just going to cut off all AI. It's too risky, it's too dangerous. And what we're saying is, yes, there is risk. There's risk with any new technology, but there is a lot of opportunity here as well. And you need to be looking at how you can do this, how you can build an infrastructure of security and privacy around these tools so that you can get them into the hands of your people so they can begin to do more with less, to have a better user experience for our employees, our residents, our partners, and our vendors. So what have we learned as we brought James into production fully? Like we talked about before, the architecture is actually more important than the model. We probably could have built this with several of the LLMs out there, but the key was understanding what we needed to do, the process we were trying to automate, and to understand that we had the proper infrastructure in place to do what we wanted to do to meet our vision. The key, number two, is really key for us, and that is I don't want to replace our analyst. We need our analyst, but what I needed to be able to do for him and our engineers and our architects was to be able to take their knowledge and encode that in so that we were able to supplement that and give them what they needed to get on to the business of doing their jobs more easily and quickly. So we understand their expertise and their judgment where we could. We don't want to bypass that. We wanted to build it in and have a path of escalation for those things that really do require to have eyes on it, hands on keyboard, what needed to be done. I'm a huge proponent of governance. We often want to wait until there's a full governance infrastructure in place to move on these types of programs. And I always say to people, yes, it's great, but unfortunately, that's not reality right now. We are in, as our CIO likes to say, it's a train. You're either on the train, running beside the train, trying to catch the train, or you're getting run over by the train. Those are your options now in this space. And so being able to put up quick guardrails, ownership, and oversight is really important, and get moving and evolve the governance structure as you're evolving the product is a key component of success right now. start small, build out intentionally, know where you're headed. We often see the statistics that come out of MIT and other institutions about how many of these AI programs were failing. The way you ensure success is to be intentional with what you're doing. It's a great fertile ground for, you can either learn or you can win or learn. And if you're learning, you're not losing, you're not failing. So what's going to work, intentional, and be able to, stop along the way, take the pulse, decide where you need to change, like we did with our architecture, for example. And then the transparency with our stakeholders is important. The first times we were handing these off to people, it was a bit shock to people to see this. Like, how did y'all do this? They were used to getting it in a very different way from us. Often it was a Teams chat because it was such an urgency. I didn't even have time to write a bulletin or a briefing. I would just have to ping you on Teams and tell you what I need you to go do. And so that has now changed. And our relationship with our partners and stakeholders in the city is also evolving as a result of this. So what does this mean if you're working in a government space? AI can be a force multiplier, especially in information security and privacy programs when you're dealing with small teams that have large scale threats and multiple threat actors who are at play. You can use AI to reduce the toil, the redundancy, but it doesn't replace oversight. You still have to have that person there using their judgment, reviewing what's being given by the agent and approving it. And so James reviewing James. But we've got it now to a 98% success rate. So we're feeling really more and more confident about this. As it learns more, as we continue to evolve, it gets better and better. That transparency is a non-negotiable in AI. If you want to build public trust, people want to understand how you're using these tools and how you're using them to make this a better place for them as a resident. And finally, that AI is a mission requirement now. It's no longer optional. You cannot take the attitude of not in my backyard with AI anymore. It is here. You have to use it. Figuring out how you can use it and do it in a way that is safe and secure and responsible is the key. So as you all look at leading in these spaces in this age of AI, what would I suggest you prioritize? Lead with governance. I spent a lot of time debunking hype and fear mongering in AI spaces. This is not Skynet. This is not the, welcoming our robot overlords. This really is a tool that is evolving. It is a powerful tool. But if you're not at the table in these discussions to help determine its future, you're going to have to accept what others decide it is. So be at that table, build those governance structures, and make sure people are aware how to use these tools well and properly, and what is sanctioned to be used for and what it cannot be used for. To enable this safe experimentation, you want to be able to enable innovation. This is truly in some spaces an innovator die culture. I'm telling people now that we are seeing some of our legacy vendors struggling in this space right now. It's going to make a significant change in how we do technology in general, but especially cybersecurity in these areas. Be transparent and make sure that, again, you allow your people to grow confidently, to innovate. They know the structure they're working in. They understand what they are sanctioned to do. Have review panels. Make sure that before anything goes into production that you're red teaming it, that you're scanning it. It's a whole other discussion around vibe coding. We won't go into that right now, but know that those structures are in place. And as I like to tell people, AI is not bringing anything net new to the table in technology and cybersecurity. The only thing that we have to now adjust for is models as part of that infrastructure. But we've always had issues around energy and how we're going to bring these things to life. We've always had issues around chips and infrastructure and hardware, applications. All of this is still what we've always been dealing with for decades. So know that this is not a big scary thing, but that there's a lot of opportunity and possibility in the use of these tools. So thank you guys so much. And my contact information here on the screen if you guys have any questions. And I have provided these slides to Sam and Jake. So happy to share those slides with you guys as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marina. Really appreciate you kind of walking us through step by step as you like the challenge that you faced and how you kind of came to a solution. It's really great to see and all of the many considerations that go into that. Well, great. So we'll shift now to doing kind of a Q&A that we have with our panelists. So I'll kick it off with a few questions. I see we have a few questions that have come in on the Q&A. So please, all of our audience members, if you have a question, make sure you put it in the Q&A rather than the chat, just so we make sure that we don't miss it. But great. So I'll kick us off with a question that I would, obviously any use of AI in government, we need to start with a deep understanding of the problem to be solved and questioning, right, whether AI is the right tool for the job. And I think that's especially true when we talk about privacy, when we talk about constituent data, right? This is an area where we have to be especially careful. So my question for you both is, in your work, how are you deciding when AI is the right tool for the job and when AI shouldn't be used in a specific case? And I'll kick it over to Bishop first.
Yeah, sure, no problem at all. Yeah, I think that is a huge question, particularly on my end when I'm speaking now with clients and working with folks that are looking at the national security opportunities to make operations more efficient in the use of AI technologies. You have to really look at the actual use case. What is this particular tool being used for? And if it's really necessary. I think what the one trap I'm beginning to see is people that are trying to find ways of shoehorning in AI technologies and their uses in some parts to justify a budget requirement, to get the funding for the tool. It's like the self-licking ice cream cone that we've always seen in government. So the question really comes down to, is this something first that we truly need and could use AI for? And if so, how are we looking for human machine teaming aspects of this? And is it in doing so, are we making ourselves more efficient, or are we making more work for us?
That's a great point. How about you, Marina? Anything to add?
So in the city of Raleigh, as part of that governance structure, we have created an AI task force. Part of what they do is review possible use cases and determine priority and whether or not things could be done with other tools that we already have in the city. And so we're big advocates for, if you already have something there and you already have a tool, make sure you're using your tools first to their greatest capability before you start wanting to bring AI to the picture. And so, really wanting to prioritize those use cases in which there is not a solution that's available in the current tool sets, and ones that we feel like are quicker wins. Again, starting small. We don't want to, replace a police detective with an AI agent. That is not a thing we want to do at all. But that AI governance, again, we've started it in the IT team and evolving that and growing it. That AI task force is part of our STEP committee in the city, which is a collective of directors from across all 23 departments in the city. So there is oversight of this, and there is checkpoints and determination of how we prioritize. We also have a very strong training program around access to these tools. So you have to be trained in prompt engineering and tokenization and consumption. You have to be trained in our policies, state statutes, federal laws that may impact based on your space, the data that you're using. So if you're wanting to use this in a space that has HIPAA data, CJIS data, PCI, there are especially strong considerations of we think maybe you should not be at the front of a queue right now as we determine how we're going to handle these.
No, I think those are all really, really helpful things to think through, right, as we're making these decisions. I want to shift a little bit to talk about leadership. Leadership is something we talk about a lot about at the Partnership for Public Service. So what role does leadership play specifically in building a culture of responsible AI use where teams can be both innovative and security conscious, right? I think people sometimes see this as a dichotomy of, well, if there's too much governance in place, if there's too much that you put in the way, you can't be innovative. And so it's kind of striking that balance. So specifically, like I said, what role does leadership play? Whether it's leadership that you have, you've adopted into your own role, or leadership that you've kind of seen from the folks above you who've been able to provide that cover or that direction. And then Marina, we can start with you.
So leadership is key here. This is all lacking in infrastructure right now. There are, we talk about, you should adopt a risk framework. Well, which risk framework are you going to adopt? The NIST AI risk management framework is already out of date, and it's still not even officially the law, the best practices. We're seeing AI frameworks come out of tool sets like Microsoft or Snowflake, if you're using that for your data lakes and lake houses and things like that. And so leadership is essential here to help cut down on the noise, to set priority, to calm people down, and to answer these questions and to set these guardrails. And so that leadership, and the great thing about this is that leadership is coming in the city of Raleigh at all levels. So we're seeing this at the city manager level, the city council level, our assistant city managers, our directors, but we're also seeing leadership coming out of grassroots. As departments and teams start to step into these tools, they're asking great questions and they're wanting to help build this infrastructure so that they can use them and be responsible about them. I am blessed to work in a city that has a very strong security culture in it. I've never worked in a place where I get 100% completion of security awareness training every year, but we do. And so that leadership and invoking that leadership at all levels is critical to be able to do this and to stay within responsible use of these tools.
Wonderful. Thank you. How about you, Bishop? What are your
Yeah,
thoughts on leadership in the
just
space?
on the side to add more so probably from the policy perspective, because I think she covered better than I can, one, and covered it in depth, the technical aspects of it. Just looking at it as you would any other type of change. I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about change management. You're talking about having a culture that is adopting a new technology, and they have a lot of concerns around it. What it means for them as individuals, as professionals in their job. What does it mean for the expectations of their role? What does it mean for the overall environment? So it's really incumbent on leadership to ensure that they're vocalizing exactly what their expectations are in the use of these technologies. And that, as Marina kind of laid out, that you have the proper rules and governance structure around how it's going to be implemented into the work streams. Because otherwise, you're leaving it to folks who may or may not be well trained or are knowledgeable on these tools to try to kind of figure out when they should be using it, how they should be using it. And you're adding some inherent risk in those types of situations. And you're fighting against adoption. The best way that you're going to be able to have a culture of adoption with these types of tools is to have clear, concise guidelines and expectations set out at the outset, and not leave a lot of guesswork or frustration to your workforce. And all of that is designed and built out and laid out by leadership. So it's really important for leaders at every level to understand their role in the implementation process, and to be able to be evangelists when necessary, to say, I've used it, I understand what we're doing here, and this is why it's important and it's why it can work.
Wonderful. We have a question that came in from Mona that says, how did Raleigh connect with North Carolina or federal government to leverage their insights and tools? I'd love to kind of broaden the question out. I mean, certainly, you can address that, Marina, but maybe broaden it out to just kind of that collaboration between different levels of government, right? In our audience, we have folks who are at the federal, state, local level. So we'd love to hear from both of you about how you've interacted across those levels of government to help collaborate and think of these challenges. So maybe, Marina, we can start with you. Oh, I think you're still on mute, Marina, sorry.
Thank you. It's officially a Zoom meeting. I'm on mute at some point trying to talk. So one of the things that I am mandated to do, that our CIO has mandated for me to do, is to build relationships. And so a lot of these relationships were already in place prior to the landing of AI in the city of Raleigh. And so we have very close working relationships up that chain. So Wake County, the county where we are, located. The CISO and I have a very strong connection. We actually even have a branch of James that we built out for Wake County to get their threat intelligence briefings now. And so trying to share that. We have very strong with our state agencies because again, there's a little bit of delineation between city and county government here. We don't get a lot of funding, things like that from the state itself, but we do partner really strongly. And we're the capital of the state of North Carolina. These offices are literally 2 blocks from my office. So if I have to walk down and have coffee with the CISO for the state board of elections, that's what we're going to do. And sharing, the only way we survive in a world of AI is collaboration. We have to break these silos down. We have to be cooperative. I know who my FBI are people. I know my CISA person. I know my DHS person. Like, we have these relationships built and they support us. And because we're the front line, we know that, if there's an incident and there's a response plan has to be kicked into place, their names and contact information are all there. We know the process and steps for that. So this is not something net new for us. These were already relationships that were in place that are essential for us to run the city. And we have been able to lean into and tap into them to be able to grow this program.
Wonderful. I love that focus that, in a time of AI, these human to human relationships are probably even more valuable, right, than ever. So appreciate that. How about you, Bishop, kind of thinking about that collaboration across levels of
Yeah, I
government?
mean, not too much to add. I think, particularly when you talk about the public-private partnerships, first at the federal level, and then you look at state and local, it's going to be just paramount to continue to have good open lines of communication, and exactly what she was laying out there, looking for opportunities to collaborate and to have face-to-face conversations. It is going to be interesting to see how we're becoming more and more technologically advanced, and these soft skills are coming back a lot. Not that they ever really left, arguably, but the ability to reach out and build truly interpersonal relationships. And to be able to really work alongside people when you're trying to work through these hard problems are going to be really important. And not that a lot of these AI coding tools, for instance, are making great coding, are making great products, but they are to some degree making it a little bit easier for a novice coder to go out and build that new piece of software. So what is now coming into play for a lot of folks with a lot of these technical experiences is saying, hey, like I need to better understand how to work side by side with a lot of these teams and to be able to manage some of these critical issues, because some of the technical aspects of this have been made a little easier. So I think the same is true when you're talking about working with government officials at the state and local level, and these types of technologies, these types of tools are really giving more people access, and particularly at the state and local level. It's freeing them up to be able to do more. So it's going to be even more important to have the silos, as she mentioned, kind of torn down and look to what we can do across the horizontal and collaborating with one another.
Wonderful. Appreciate that. Well, I have a long list of other questions that I would love to ask, but I'm going to pull one more question, one final question we have from the Q&A. Before I do that, I just want to note that my colleague Sam is going to drop a link in the chat for our survey. Every event that we do, if you've joined us, we have a survey that's really short. I think it's just 4 questions, just to find out how you feel about the event and how we can improve these events in the future. So please make sure you click on that, have it open, because once we close the Zoom, you may lose access to it. So just to flag that, Sam, if you could put that in the chat when you have a minute. But our final question I would love to pull is a question about transparency. So this question comes from Pamela. It says, I'm curious what steps you took and platforms you use to provide transparency. So I think this was specifically, Marina, you talking about kind of your role, but would love to kind of just talk about the role of transparency in general. So Bishop, how about we start with you, kind of the role of transparency as you've kind of worked in this space that's around AI, and then we'll have Marina close this out.
Yeah, for me, a lot of what I was doing, particularly in the private sector, was focused on that. And when you're looking at the ethical use and ethical development of these technologies, it goes back mainly to the use case I used, talking about the green data sets and ensuring that the right privacy waivers were used. But it also really matters to be clear about how you plan to leverage these types of technologies at the outset. Like, who is actually using them? It's one thing to say that you're going to utilize, again, I'm still using my use case, any type of smart camera technology to identify those individuals that may need assistance, that, you know, a missing person, or someone who, thinking on a local level, we see unfortunately elderly, for instance, that get away from home and become lost, and that type of technology could be really helpful. It also could be quickly abused to track individuals and their movements and record that data. So you have to be very clear on what it is you're doing, what the capabilities are, and making sure that the public understands the ramifications of leveraging, excuse me, this type of technology. There are always tremendous benefits, but there are lots of concerns and risk involved with it too. So you need to leave those lines of communication as open as possible.
Well, thank you. And then, yeah, over to you, Marina, to wrap this up. And if you could share maybe specifics around the platforms that you're using as you're providing that transparency.
Yeah, I had this week someone to describe what we do as radical transparency. We in cybersecurity have this really bad legacy of believing that security through obscurity is an actual thing. It's not. And so with our stakeholder, one of the first things you need to be able to do is obviously identify your stakeholders and build a communications plan for that. And so we've leaned into that AI task force. We leaned into our STEP committee. Our CIO uses his management team meetings and provides this information. We make this information available mainly right now through our SharePoint site. But we're also trying to find other ways that we can share pieces of this in other ways and other platforms. So one of the things that we're working on now is a third-party risk management platform, because AI changes supply chain risk, and third-party risk management has to evolve with that. And so being able to our team writes those risk assessments. We do the risk scoring. We've done all that in-house. But now being able to democratize this down to the departmental level to allow them in real time to have a platform to do this, to work and to engage with vendors to get the information they need to make the best business decisions based on the risk is important. And so things like a third-party risk management platform, we're bringing in a data security posture management platform. So again, our stakeholders and our departments can see what data they have and the classification of that data, so they're making the best decisions around how to use these AI tools and platforms without stepping outside the boundaries of compliance and governance. And so this is going to continue to evolve. I do a CISO newsletter monthly, and I will include information about this in our CISO newsletter that goes out to all of our employees. A lot of this information, again, gets fed up through our CIO into the city council and city manager's office. And so we work really hard to be as transparent in the city of Raleigh infrastructure, as well as in our shared spaces in the government. So county, state, federal, being transparent with them, sharing with them, because they are also huge supporters of what we do. And again, leaning into those relationships we have. Our vendor partners, we haven't talked a lot about this, but vendor partnerships are really critical in this space. We were able to negotiate feeds at a reduced price, threat intelligence feeds at a reduced price, because of being able to explain to our vendors what we were trying to do and what we needed to do and how they could help us. And therefore, again, we're going to be more engaged as a buyer. We're going to build that partnership, and it helps solidify their space in the city. So a lot of different tools are needed here to do this transparency, but right now it's mainly within our Microsoft ecosystem, because that is the one that most of our employee stakeholders have access to.
If I could add one thing to that too, I recently worked with a private sector business client, getting them around the idea of being able to provide an agentic AI security risk layer. To what you were saying, that was agnostic as to which algorithm was actually being used within the systems, because you have so many tools now that pull from multiple ones. But as we're seeing more of these tools are becoming more sophisticated, they become very zealous in the way that they go about their tasking. So if you have basically a layer that's acting as the gatekeeper, to say, hey, should this tool be going outside of our system to go do X, Y, and Z? You can at least have some oversight from a technical perspective, and then you can go back and provide reports that give you more transparency to your community or your organization about what these tools are being used and what these tools are doing and how they're being used.
Yeah, Gartner calls them LLM observability tools, and that is another area we are looking into finding so that we can put a gate in front of no matter what the tool is, we can see it and we can help our users make sure, again, that they are staying within compliance and regulatory guidelines.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I could certainly continue this conversation for hours, but we're going to go ahead and close it up there. Sam is putting up a slide here that has more contact information about the AI Center for Government. So if you want to participate in future events, today's event has been recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel as well as our website. A huge thank you to Marina and to Bishop for the work that you've done, continue to do, and will do in the future, for being so generous with your time today and sharing your lessons learned with folks. And just really appreciate it. Again, if you haven't, please take a chance to click on that survey link that's in the chat, just so you can at least have it open in another tab if you don't have time to take it right away. But again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.